to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We are joined by two men who each ran the Central Intelligence Agency. Mike Morrell served as the acting CIA director in the Obama administration and advised Hillary Clinton's campaign. Ambassador James Woolsey was CIA director in the Clinton administration and served as an advisor to President-elect Trump's campaign until last week. Ambassador Woolsey, I want to start with you. You advised the Trump campaign. For months, Mr. Trump was very skeptical about this idea that Russia meddled in the election. Ryan Priebus said today that Mr. Trump believes what everybody believes, that the Russians tried to meddle in the election. What do you make of that change of mind?
Well, first of all, let me say I worked a bit on the campaign, but I was not an advisor on the transition because they were not coming to me for any advice, so I took my name off the list. I didn't want to fly under false colors. I think that the evolution of his views is really quite clear. I think he started out with one set of views, and they've evolved as he's learned more. I think a lot of people were enlightened by the 25-page memo that the intelligence community put out, and made it a lot clearer how involved the Russians have been. I've been saying for some weeks that disinformation, otherwise known as lying, is a more permanent fixture of the Russian propaganda system, and that is something that they have now transitioned over into using it or adopting that technique with cyber, not just with publications and so forth as they have for the last 50, 60, 70 years.
Mike, how should people understand the level of certainty here? I mean, with this report, as they think about how to interpret this, and Donald Trump has been skeptical, so how tight is are the findings here?
When you read the report, it seems thin in evidence. Right, it's mostly the assessment. Here's what we think. The evidence isn't there because it's classified. So the declassified report has taken out the evidence. What caught my attention was the intelligence community saying they have high confidence in these judgments.
Sure.
And we don't attach that label to just any judgment. To have high confidence, you have to have multiple sources, you have to have direct evidence, more than a circumstantial case. So I think the case that the Russians meddled in the election broadly, not just hacking the DNC, but broadly in all the ways Jim talked about, is solid.
Ambassador Woolsey, let me ask you this question. You mentioned Donald Trump's evolution on this issue. When when it was first announced that there were these findings, he wasn't just skeptical about the information, but he made a broader claim about the intelligence agencies. His transition put out a statement saying, remember, this is the crowd that got weapons of mass destruction wrong in Iraq. Donald Trump has said that, in his view, is the worst blunder in American history. So he has tied the findings to what he thinks is the worst blunder in American history. We've heard in reporting that has not been well received. Is that right? What's the fallout from that larger claim he seems to be making about the worthiness of the work that the intelligence agencies do?
Well, it's a complex set of issues. I think probably the press and much of the public does think that the weapons of mass destruction characterization was very wrong. The problem is that it's an old Soviet agitprop phrase, and it covers chemical, bacteriological, and nuclear. And there were chemical and bacteriological weapons in Iraq, quite clear. What there was not was nuclear. And people really need to get into that in order to explain thoroughly what their views are, and I don't think we haven't seen that yet from Donald Trump.
So John, the president-elect has done two things, right? He's questioned the capabilities of the intelligence community publicly. But the other thing he's done, which is actually more damaging, I think, is he's questioned the intelligence community's integrity by implying that their assessment was politically motivated. And that's a gut punch to people who go to work every day, nonpartisan, apolitical, trying to call it like they see it. So there are two different issues here. The president-elect is wrong about the capabilities question. The CIA, for example, looks at every single judgment they make a year later, and they say, did we get it right or did we get it wrong? And the batting average is very high. It looks like a free throw percentage in basketball. And on the integrity question, he's just as wrong. This is the most apolitical institution I know. It actually is not a political bone in its body, and so he has both of those points wrong, and it has undermined morale in the intelligence community and at CIA, and that's a big issue.
I think you're going to find that the 140-character rule of tweets that basically governed a lot of the behavior during the campaign is looked at differently as one moves into governance. One can conduct, and Donald Trump showed it successfully, a campaign for president on largely 140-character statements. But you can't really govern that way. And he's in the middle of several transitions. I think they're tending in a very positive direction, but we'll have to see.
But there have been a lot of tweets this week. Shows no sign of slowing.
He's not governing yet.
Mike, let me ask you, what's the practical effect of the morale and the challenging? Help people explain how this can create challenges for the new president.
So the first is, I think that if the men and women of CIA don't believe a president is listening to what they have to say, to the facts they put on the table and the fact-based analysis that they put on the table, their interest in working there is going to go way down. And if this continues, and I think the president-elect took an important first step in the comments he made after the Friday briefing in the positive direction. But if his disparagement continues, people will walk, and that will do serious damage to the CIA and the intelligence community. The other practical effect it has is we tell people who are spying for us, who are actually putting their life on the line to spy for us, that their information is going to the highest levels of our government and is being used to make the world a better place. So if we can't tell spies that, if they see that on TV, they're not going to spy for us. So I think there are significant effects here if the disparagement continues.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that Donald Trump's supporters say is this is part of his kind of run-and-gun, disruptive, chaotic approach that was so successful in the campaign, and that's just the way he is.
I don't think that's the way he is generally. I've been in a couple of meetings with him, and he's reasonable. He asks good questions. He makes smart comments. His overall conduct in small meetings, at least in my limited experience, is considerably different than when he's standing up in a stadium before 40 or 50,000 of my fellow Oklahomans and drawing all sorts of cheers. It's his shtick that he performs the way he does before big audiences and so forth. I think he's you're going to see growth and evolution on a number of these issues over the course of the next several weeks, and I think I would advise people not to hold him to a detailed support of everything he said on Twitter during the campaign.